What's up, guys? This is Franco, and welcome to the mobile home movement, where we showcase the beauty and affordability of mobile homes. Here we break false myths and share all the positive stories of how mobile home ownership transforms lives. I'm Franco Perez, and this is the mobile home movement. Today we have an amazing guest. We have Gerry McCaughey. He's the CEO of Offsite Tech and founder of Integra. He's also named Industry Entrepreneur of the Year by Ernst & Young, and was also an influential force of Europe's offsite construction as well. So it's an honor to have you here, Gerry. If you could, just please tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and how you're in this construction industry.
Well, thank you very much for the introduction. I personally have been in the industry for close on between 35 and 40 years, but my family's actually been in offsite construction for close on 60 years. So my dad was probably one of the original people in the modern iteration, and I'm modern, I mean going back 60 years in Europe, because it's been much more used over there than it has been here. He's probably one of the pioneers in bringing offsite construction to the European market. And then when I was in college, I actually did a degree in marketing, but I did all my research into the offsite industry and came up with an idea one day to set up an offsite company in Ireland that would be international in its view, in its look, in its outlook. And my dad had sold out of his previous business, and one day said to me, I was living in California at the time after I graduated from college. Said, if you believed in that report, why don't you come back here, put your money where your mouth is, and let's have a go at it. And actually 3 months after that I did, I moved back to Ireland in December the 3rd, 1989, and we set up a small company along with my brother and another guy called Jim McBride in a little town called Monaghan. The 4 of us started up, but it's about 15 years later, we were the largest offsite company in Europe.
Wow.
So the plan worked. We had 5 factories, 3 in Ireland, 2 in the UK, and we were exporting as far away as Japan. And like we had done the world's first 6-story wood frame building. We did the UK's first zero carbon, not zero net energy, which is difficult, but it's not zero. We did zero carbon, which was way in excess of that. And so from both an engineering and a thermal performance perspective, we were pretty much world leading. Although most people in the US would never have heard of us, because nobody in the US ever looks outside of the US. But back over there, 30 years ago, we were leading the way in offsite construction. And I sold that business in 2005 to a global building materials company called Kingspan, who happened to be an Irish company, but they're global, they're all over the world. Yeah. And then I moved to the US. And sort of when I moved here, the US economy was in recession. I mean, major recession. It was after the 2006, 2007 crash. And but I just looked at the industry over here and said, I mean, this is the country that put a man on the moon, and yet they're still building using 18th century technology to build homes. And I was going, okay, there's got to be an opening here. But I wanted to wait till the market turned around. And so when the market started to turn around, then I said, okay, let's take a look at this and see, is there a reason why they haven't been doing it, or that would prevent me doing it in the future? And if there isn't, then I'm going to try and start this. So I did. And I looked at it and said, okay, I can't find a fundamental reason why it won't work. So I literally put together a team that, what I would classify some of the most experienced people in the world of doing it, because a lot of them had to work with me in my previous company in Ireland called Century Homes. And put that team together and said, you know, you guys crazy enough to come and have a go at this in the US? And lo and behold, a bunch of them decided they wanted to give it a shot. And so we actually set up, when I set up Integra, our engineering office is still in Ireland. It's actually in my hometown. We have 60 people employed in Ireland, and then Integra has over 250 people employed in California. So it's over 300 people. But the engineering function was all carried out in Europe.
It's amazing. So
wow, that's how I got. That's a very short version of how I got to here.
That's really cool. And it's amazing that you're in California now. And one thing I did want to touch on is kind of like with the US market today, and especially high density areas, where do you see kind of the importance of what we need as far as construction advancement, and what's the future of construction and housing, and what are the problems that we're having right now that can be solved?
or put this way, we're not going to get through all those topics in this in this call. I can guarantee you that. I'd say I think probably from your listeners' perspective, and remember now I'm 14 years living in the United States, and I have 3 children born here, and I'm a US citizen. So I sort of, when I say these things, and it sounds like I'm being critical of the US. Remember, I'm not. I'm just giving you an unbiased view of having worked on both sides of the Atlantic. So I've seen the differences between it, and I look at US construction, US residential construction, and I make that distinction very advisedly between residential and commercial. The commercial sector here is a different league. I mean, they are definitely applying modern methods to build their buildings and are advanced processes and systems. But residential, to me, is, and I mean politely saying this, while they're using technology to frame homes that's 200 years old, their basic processes are about 20 to 30 years behind Europe on top of that. So it's to me, it's somewhat frustrating to watch. To listen to the news headlines where they start talking about labor shortages, and they talk about the affordability issue, and they talk about the elongated timeframes it takes to get buildings built. And I think to myself, yeah, what do you expect? You're using an 18th century technology to build your homes. You have this extremely elongated, dysfunctional process that involves, architects, engineers, GCs, framers involved, where everything is sequential and nothing runs parallel, which basically just drags the whole process out. And yet nobody wants to talk about the solution. And so I give you to take the hottest topic at the moment, which is probably the labor shortage. Yeah. My argument, and I genuinely mean this having looked at it, there isn't a labor shortage when it comes, and I'm particularly referring to framing, although they say there is, but from my perspective, there isn't a labor shortage with regard to framing. There's a process problem.
Absolutely.
Right? If you said, I mean, if you can imagine how many people are in a car manufacturing plant today, but you said you wanted to build the same technologically complex cars at the same volumes as you're building now, but you went back 100 years. Think of how many more men you would take, manpower it would take in that factory to do that. It would be nearly impossible to do. But that's the construction industry. Houses have got more technically complex over the years, yet the processes, the systems to build them haven't changed. Mm-hmm. So my argument would be is that when you look at modern offsite construction, it brings about a 500% increase in productivity. So that's the equivalent of multiplying the current workforce 5 times.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah. So if every house in the United States was being framed using an offsite system, there would not be a labor shortage. In fact, you'd have more labor to go around all the other trades. You'd be building to a higher quality, more sustainably, and in a more safe environment. But all you hear in the American media is there's a labor shortage, there's a labor shortage, there's a labor shortage. But if you're refusing to use modern technology to improve productivity, then that's what you're going to have. Because I make the analogy that if you think about how, assume the framer, and I know the framers hate me saying this, but I'm going to say it anyway. If you think about how does the boss man, the jefe, the lead framer get from his home to his job site? He'll arrive in his brand new F-150 with all the modern technology that you can think of inside it, with his cellular phone and his iPad. Mm-hmm. And he gets onto a job site and there's a guy swinging a hammer. It makes no sense. Right? Mm-hmm. So they want to use, or if you think, how does the lumber get dropped to the job site? The lumber gets dropped on an 18-wheeler, with all the technology inside of it. It's not pulled to the job site with a horse and cart. Mm-hmm. Right? Every single thing around construction, around it, and including the guys who are going to say, have all modernized. But the minute you hit the job site, we go back 200 years. Yeah. Now, that's why we have a problem. We have a productivity problem because we won't give the existing workforce the tools to improve their productivity. We expect them to do what they've been doing for 200 years without modern tools. Now, if you even take that to, say, kitchen cabinet manufacturing, And kitchen cabinet manufacturing today is probably one of the most automated processes that you can actually come across with anything related to construction. I mean, it's absolute digitized CNC production. Mm-hmm. And yet the framing of the house is a guy with a skill saw and a hammer.
Exactly.
I mean, it makes no sense. So what Offsite does is it employs modern technology to the building of framing that house using digitization, CNC, robotics, to a much more, to improve productivity to a much higher quality and do it in a much more safe environment. And so if you talk about the future of construction, that's where it has to go. There is no other way.
No, I totally believe in what you're saying, and it works. It benefits all around the workforce, and also it inspires for more developers to be able to build more housing, which then allows more affordability, right? So that's Correct. One of the biggest things. Now, as far as what do you see that is one of the, outside of the process, what's the most beneficial thing about offsite construction compared to how we're building it today? What are some of the biggest things that's the benefits of that?
Well, let me tell you a little quick anecdote of the story. So I was on a job site quite recently, and I asked one of the framers on the job site who's used to stick framing, and I went up to him and I know him. I've met him several times. I just having the conversation. So he says, "Tell me seriously, what do you think about offsite construction using you working here as effectively an erector as opposed to a stick framer?" And he turned around to me, and this was his words, and he said, "I love it." And I said, "Why?" And there's the answer that I didn't expect to get was, he said, "Because when I go home in the evening, I don't have to take ibuprofen." Right? Yeah. But it's true, because there's no stress on the body, mm-hmm. because there's a crane employed that's doing all of the heavy lifting. It's not now everything having to be dragged or a beam swinging out of a gradall that could possibly hit them or fall down, or materials all over the place. It's a very systematic approach, and the crane is doing, as I said, all the heavy lifting, and so there's very little stress in the body. One of the other guys said he said on the jobs, when I work on stick framing, I have to use muscle. He said when I work here, I have to use my head.
Wow.
And so that to me is one of the hidden benefits that people don't really talk about a lot. But when you think about the labor issue again, is the current rate of attrition in the framing industry is for every one person who joins the industry, 5 leave, 5 are retiring. Mm-hmm. Now, think about that in another sense. The 5 who are leaving are typically the older guys who have the experience. Yeah. So we're losing the experience, and the one new guy who's coming in is typically inexperienced. Yeah. So you have a shortfall of 4 to 1 or 5 to 1. Mm-hmm. But the one you're getting is inexperienced, and the 5 we're losing are the people we don't want to lose because they have the experience and the knowledge, but they're generally leaving because their bodies are burned out. Mm-hmm. No, they're 50, 55 years of age. They've had it. They can't do it any longer. But offsite extends their working life. Mm-hmm. It allows them, because they're using their head, not their muscle. So now they can continue on, and we get the benefit of their experience. So that to me is a hidden advantage of offsite that's not really discussed enough. I mean, everybody looks at the speed of it and the sustainability of it, mm-hmm. but how it actually manages to improve the continuation of the experienced workforce, that to me is a massive hidden benefit that's not discussed enough.
Huge impact, and also the safety element of it as well.
Absolutely. And there was a recent report out of the UK actually that said that crane erected wood frame has a 20% improvement on safety over non-crane erected offsite. 20%.
Yeah.
When you think about that may put that in another way. I mean, that means there's people going to get home to their families on those job sites that may not have got home otherwise. Absolutely. But that's the reality. This construction is a dangerous process, but the crane does not add danger to the site. It actually improves safety on the site. Mm-hmm. So there's a whole load of benefits there.
Yeah. If you could, because I know you're doing this in Europe and also in Japan and that sort of thing. And through all of that, I know you're very big on the understanding of design and engineering. Could you tell us a little bit more about what's involved when it comes to the process of that during?
Yeah, I mean, because and it's a very important point. Thank you for bringing it up. It's a very, very important point where I think one of the difficulties in the US market is for true, and I make this distinction, Franco, that there's a lot of listeners who will think that component manufacturers are the same as an offsite company. They are not. They are absolutely not, because a component by its nature, by definition, is an element, but offsite is a system. So the analogy I would use is no more than the wing of a plane is an aircraft. Mm-hmm. And it's not. A wing is an element of an aircraft. A wall panel from a component manufacturer is not an offsite solution. Yeah. It's just an element. And here's where it runs into the difficulty. When people go around thinking, because if you went on, or let's say you went in, you're buying the engine of a car, which is probably a very important part of a car, but you're not going to be able to drive the engine down the road because it needs all the other pieces. Yeah. The same thing is when people buy wall panels here in the US and they think that's an offsite solution and they don't get the benefit that they thought they were going to get. They think, oh, offsite doesn't work. It's not that offsite doesn't work, because you didn't get offsite. You got a wall panel, which is not a solution. It's not a system. And so bring that around to the design part is that a lot of the investment by the European, I use the European style offsite companies, is into the design and engineering side of the business, because 80% of the benefit that an offsite company brings to a builder occurs before a stick is cut or a nail gun is fired. Mm-hmm. Because it's the discipline and the systematic approach to the design of the building to improve the efficiency and pull all of the trades together to make sure that you figured out every problem before it ever arrives on site, and that all the trades have coordinated with each other in advance. So that then all has to be incorporated into the design, the drawings. Then you have to understand how the building is going to go together. You have to try to do it from an efficiency point of view, from a safety point of view, from a logistic point of view. Nothing's left to after the fact. Everything is done before the fact. And that requires a heavy investment in very sophisticated software and a heavy investment in training in very experienced designers who understand how offsite works. Absolutely. Actually, that doesn't really exist in the US. And that's hence why we had to put our office, when we tried to recruit those people in the US, couldn't get them. So we had to set up our design and engineering office back in Ireland, because there's a culture and a history and an industry built up around true offsite construction in Europe that doesn't exist in the US. And I want to be very clear to all of you. Offsite construction and component manufacturing are not the same thing. Mm-hmm. No more than a wing is a plane, a wall panel is not an offsite solution. So that's a perfect transition to kind of the next question. Doing this in many different countries, where do you feel what is our industry really missing to really advance construction, as far as specifically in the residential side of things, to be able to build more units? Is politics in the mix of trying to help them understand the efficiencies of this, or where do you see what missing parts do we need to grow? And I think, to be fair, what I think is when you bring anything new to a market, doesn't matter what product you bring, you have to go through that market adoption phase. Mm-hmm. And this is, I think, where people, and again, I've been a long time at this, and I realize you don't change an industry overnight. Right? And in every new product that's bought out, they say that approximately 2.25% of the marketplace are innovators. So when you go to sell something that's brand new to some people, the naive tend to look at the 100%, saying, I'm going after 100% of the market. The reality is, when you introduce that product, there's only 2.25% of the population that are even worth talking to, that will even listen to you, because the rest won't listen until the innovators have tried it, used it, and proved it. Wow. So the way I sort of look at the US market now, and this is based on my experience in Europe, is we're in that early adoption phase now. We're in that 2.25% where what you're seeing happen with true offsite construction is the innovators starting to use it. And they're until enough of them have taken it on board and are convinced of it and are proving it and are showing it to everybody else, it'll take a while. So my view is we're probably in a 15-year phase here before we see real serious adoption of true offsite construction in the marketplace. But it's definitely happening. I mean, and there's case after case to prove that it's actually happening, because you only even have to look at the amount of investment that's going into it at the moment. Yeah. People are starting to see this is the future. So to use that expression, it's not your grandfather's Oldsmobile. I mean, this is what they thought about component manufacturing and old ways of doing it. There's a new era happening here where you're seeing modern technology, modern factories, modern software being used, and you're seeing some very large builders starting to make investments. I mean, probably the biggest one of the whole lot. Other than we raised $45 million from Louisiana Pacific to invest in a factory in California, but you see that Pulte, one of the largest home builders in the US, bought ICG in Jacksonville, in Florida, to do offsite construction. And you have another company in Texas now called Future Frame that's invested in heavy automation. So you're starting to see big investments going in, and you're starting to hear the builders realizing that this is the only way they can push this forward. I mean, the amount of builders that contact me, I give you an example. So twice this week, I got phone calls from very large builders effectively saying, we don't know how to do this. We want to do it, but we're afraid, but we don't know how to do it. Yeah. Two, like, I think these are not small. These are guys that they're not small, but that to me said an awful lot more about the fact that the industry was maturing. Yeah. Because they weren't rushing into it. They were actually saying, we want to do it, but we want to do it right. We're aware that if we do it on our own without some help, we'll probably mess it up. Can you help us? And so that to me is a very, very strong sign that there's a bubbling under the ground here of builders who are just waiting for the moment to make the switch. So I'm whilst I'm saying it's 15 years in terms of massive adoption, I'm very confident that there's a lot of stuff happening in the background here now that's going to support that over the next 15 years.
Well, I totally agree with you. I mean, we start to see it, especially like on our YouTube channel, so much attention around factory built housing and anything that really makes construction more efficient. So much money getting into it and attention going into it.
But yeah. I think this is important for your listeners as well, because everything at the end of the day always comes back down to money, right? Quite rightly. We live in a capitalist society, and we're all capitalists, and we're all in to make money at the end of the day. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I'll give you an example of a multifamily developer who I was involved in the process of selling the project to him. And he came along and he said, I love the technology. I love what you're proposing. I would love to use it, but I don't know you. You know, I hear you, I see you, but I've never used you. I don't know you. And I've got a framer I've been using for the last 10 years who stick frames for me. Yeah, I know he's not the fastest, but I know him. And he said, and by the way, he said, he's a little bit cheaper than you guys. And so he said, I can't really take the risk. I just can't get my head around it. And so we said to him, tell you what, can you get us the schedule that the stick framer is giving you to complete? Now, this was 272 units in 3-story buildings. I said, can you get the schedule off him as how long it's going to take him? And he did. And then we said, well, here's our schedule, right? And we said, no, there's a dramatic difference here in time frame. So what's that time frame worth to you? Because we said we'd finish it in 14 weeks. I said, what's the time frame difference worth to you? And he said, good question. I'll have to figure it out. But he went off and he figured it out. And he said that if you could do that, if you could do it in 14 weeks, he said that between earlier heads on beds, which is earlier revenue coming to him, plus the fact that he gets his construction loan converted to his permanent loan, plus the reduced amount of waste on site and the reduced total overheads on the project. Because that's where a lot of people don't fully understand. When you reduce the time frame on a project like that, it's not just the carry cost and the interest. look at the total amount of overhead you've applied to it. And now if you take out 3 or 4 months out of the equation, and you're taking those 3 or 4 months of overhead off it as well. And he said, it amounts to about $600,000 if you can do it in 14 weeks. And he said, but I find it hard to believe that you could do it in 14 weeks. And so we said to him, we put this proposal to him. We said, okay, we'll do it for the same amount of money as the stick framer, on the basis that if we do it in 14 weeks, you share that $600,000 with us. In other words, you get $300,000 of a benefit, and we get $300,000 of a benefit. And he said, and I said, and if we're late, we don't get paid it. We take the chance. And he said, okay, that is a fair deal.
There you go.
He wrote the check for the $300,000.
I love that.
And we are now on the second phase of that project, which is 172 units, and it wasn't even competitively bid.
Wow, that's amazing.
Right? Because he just went. There was no point competitively bidding, because he knew how much money we were saving him. Like, there was no way the stick framer could actually get there.
Yeah.
But when he understood the time value of money, and I went, okay, there's a clear black and white. Yeah. And what we're seeing now is more and more, particularly of the multifamily developers, where time really is money to them, because you just simply heads on beds. If you've got, just take round figures, you've got 200 units, and you've got them 200 units rented 2 months earlier. And in California, just assume you're getting $2,000 per unit, so that's $4,000 over the 2 months by 200. I mean, the savings are ferocious.
Yeah.
So it's very hard to argue the economics when you actually truly know what your costs are and what your carry costs are. Where we run into the difficulty is getting the single family builders to understand that.
Yeah,
they tend to be a little bit less knowledgeable about what their total costs are, but the multifamily developers, they know exactly how much time and money is actually costing. I was with another one yesterday who was very clear, and he said, I mean, every day their view was, there's a smaller project. He said every day it's costing us $5,000. So every day you take off, you save $5,000. Now, remember, that $5,000 is running over a weekend as well, so it's like $35,000 per week. So every time we shorten weeks out of it, you're taking that amount of money off the table. Yeah. So
no, that's amazing.
there is no arguing with the economics of it, but it's taking the market a little bit of a while to understand that you can deliver those savings and for them to buy into it. But it's happened.
Yeah. And for them to understand the value. Well, we're coming into the end of this. Is there anything that you feel like you'd love to kind of share to our followers, and which you'd like more people to know at all?
Well, I suppose I would say is that if you never try it, you'll never know. And that's my sort of my view to people who are listening is, what have you got to lose by trying an offsite? So if somebody's coming along to you and saying, even if they're saying they're slightly more expensive, but they're saying you'll save it in the back end costs, and you're at this, as you're living, why not try it? Try it, give it. You'll never know, or as that American expression goes, you'll miss 100% of the shots you never take. Yeah. And so if you never try offsite, then you're never going to know. But most importantly, do not confuse simple wall panels from a component manufacturer as an offsite solution. They will not deliver the benefit, and you will regret it. Make sure you're talking to somebody who understands what an integrated offsite solution is. And that's a key element to this. Try it, but understand that you need to be talking to the right companies.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks for being on our show, and it's amazing having you. So, and look forward to talking to you again, man.
Delighted, Franco. Thank you very much, and happy building to everybody.
All right.
Thank you for joining the Mobile Home Movement. Join us each Wednesday at 10 a.m. PST for new episodes. And don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, share, and we love those 5-star ratings.